Welcome back to Achieving Unlimited Health. In our last episode, Dr. Cima showed us how nutrition, the chemical side of the triune, is the foundation of unlimited health. So today, we're taking that a step further by looking at body composition. Why does losing inches matter more than losing pounds? And how can focusing on the right measurements help you feel better, look better, and live better? So, we're going to learn all about that today with Dr. Cima. He's going to share both his personal experiences and patient stories to bring this to life. So let's dive in. Hi, Dr. Seema. How are you?
Good. How you doing today, Layla?
Good, good. I'm always excited to chat with you. I know last time we explored a little bit about how nutrition, the chemical side, really sets the foundation for unlimited health. So today we're tackling something almost everybody struggles with, myself included, pretty much everyone I know with weight, right? So, you
Absolutely.
know, you say that the real key isn't the number on the scale, but it's the body composition. So let's
Correct.
dive into that. What really first led you to that realization?
Well, when I first got into nutrition, again, even back then, back in the early '80s, people were, still having problems with weight. And back then they would just like either starving themselves, then they were doing the weight loss pills back then.
Mhm.
And now they're doing the shots, for, kind of a combination of diabetes and weight loss at the same time. And they're always barking up the wrong tree. And so when I was first getting into this, I mean, my thing was I was very light. I was like 165, and I got into bodybuilding, and then I wanted to gain a lot of weight, but not just fat. I wanted to put a lot of muscle on. So I started to study what a lot of bodybuilders did, and I started to realize that they weren't involved with you know they wanted to have a good weight, don't get me wrong, but they wanted to have a good amount of muscle mass too. So they really trained and ate for, achieving a lot of muscle mass. And then when I started to realize like what people were trying to do, eh, even back in the 60s and the 70s, they would just try to starve you. They'd say, just cut your calories back, eat the minimum amount every day, have 1,200 calories, 1,000 calories, 800 calories, and people were falling for that nonsense. And it was like, if you just look at everything logically, and that's what I always tried to do. It was always like, let's look at this like, why are people like gaining weight and not losing weight? And then you start to look at things like metabolism, for example. It's a very, very simple principle. Everybody has a metabolic rate, and each one of us, the rate is different. But there's two phases to metabolism. There's the anabolic phase, which is the buildup phase, and the catabolic phase, which is the breakdown phase. So usually during the night when you're sleeping, hopefully if you're sleeping, your body can repair and rebuild itself. So that's what they call it, the anabolic phase. It starts to produce more cells, more hormones, more enzymes, more antibodies. It starts to heal things that have been traumatized for the last few days, as long as you're giving it enough rest and enough food. So I looked at metabolism and I'm saying to myself, well, that's the metabolic engine of the body. And so now think about it this way, because people just it doesn't make sense when they're trying to starve themselves. It's like when I get into my car, okay, I have a sports car, and if I wanted to go fast, I give it more gas. I don't give it less gas. I don't give it, it's just like your body. You want to stimulate your metabolism, you got to give it more gas. You got to give it more fuel. And if you don't give it more fuel, it's gonna just kind of reverse itself and kind of literally break down and start to decrease the amount of calorie burning capacity of the body by doing that. So what they did was they looked at the metabolism and said, well, there's the same thing with the fireplace. You want a big burning fire, you put more logs in. You don't take logs away, because you want that metabolism or that engine to keep on burning and burning and burning and burning and just get up there. So instead of eating 1,200 calories a day, you can eat 2,500, 3,000 calories a day and enjoy the food. So it was like I saw that was a big issue. It's like if you want to lose weight, you can't starve the body. You just can't do it. It doesn't make sense. And because people have been trying to do that for the last 30, 40 years, the obesity problem, like we spoke about, is worse and worse and worse. And it's getting worse with the children today, too, as well. So it's really a combination of how to eat and then how to exercise properly to increase muscle mass. And that's what it is. What you want to start to do is you want to boost up your metabolism. By boosting your metabolism, you have to eat more. You have to do that, but it's eating the right things too. It's like let's say you have a high performance car and you put diesel fuel in there. Well, the car's going to break down. You're not putting the right fuel in. The same thing with your body. If you're not putting the right fuel in, it doesn't matter, you know, what you do, how many calories you're taking in, the body can't utilize that food properly, so it starts to break down. And so that was the biggest issue I saw way back when, because people were just stuck on calories, and I was like, how many calories do you eat a day? They go 800. It's like, how do you survive? You can't survive. Your body's going to break down sooner or later. It is. I mean, you'll drop some weight, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. But it's the type of weight that you lost. It's not so much how much you lost. And that's what people always do. I lost 30 pounds. I lost 40 pounds. I lost 50 pounds. And it's like, okay, I'm glad you lost weight, but what did you lose? I mean, there's three things that you lose. You either lose water, you lose fat, or you lose what they call lean muscle mass, or bone and organ and stuff like that. So those are the three things that basically makes up your body composition. So the average person, when they go on a diet and they lose, like, let's say 10 pounds, they're like excited. And that usually occurs in the first week or 2 weeks of their diet. And they don't realize that the majority of that weight was water. Okay. And the next most abundant thing that what makes up is your protein, your lean body mass. And then the last thing that you do is, like, you'll lose some fat. So if you lost like 10 pounds, you're probably losing like 3 to 4 pounds of water, 3 to 4 pounds of muscle mass, and 1 or 2 pounds of fat. So you literally, even though you're losing weight, you're getting fatter. That's the crazy part. What I see a lot of people who go, I'm losing weight, but my clothes don't fit good anymore. I'm having difficulty, buttoning my dress or my pants or whatever, and I don't know why this is happening, because I'm not eating a lot, and they are eating a lot. They're just eating the wrong things, and they're exercising improperly too, because people will go on these strict diets, and they keep on thinking that it's going to change. It doesn't change. They've been going on strict diets for decades, and so they go and they get into an exercise program, but their exercise program is, well, I walk. That's not exercise, and that's not going to put muscle mass on. So you can walk 3 or 4 miles a day, and you're not going to see much of a change in the weight. You might see some, but it's going to be temporary, because you're spending, you're going to walk 3 miles, you're going to be spending close to an hour walking. And so if you're going to do that amount of exercise, you might as well do something that's going to help put on muscle mass. So, and back then, so the only thing that I knew that could do that was with progressive resistance training, weight training, but not in a way that you're killing yourself and trying to, lift this super heavy weight and hurting yourself and all the rest, because that's not really what you want to do either. But the only exercise that will basically put muscle mass on is weights. Or you can say, let's say like, using your body weight itself, like doing push-ups and chins and all the rest of that stuff. But those are the things that you really need to do to stimulate muscle production. And then if you eat a certain way, you'll produce more muscle. And the good thing about that, and again, a lot of these, like, old wives' tales, I'll ask patients. I mean, I'm talking about doctors. I'm not talking about like just a general person.
Mhm.
What weighs more, muscle or fat? And they go, oh, muscle. And it's like, no, a pound of fat, a pound of muscle weighs the same. It's not any different. The fat occupies twice the amount of space that muscle does. Took your body right now and took 10 pounds of fat off of it and just exchange it for 10 pounds of muscle, you would still be the same weight, but you'd look like you lost weight. You'd burn an additional 500 to 1,000 calories every single day just to sustain that weight. So, in the course of a week, you're looking at 3,500, 7,000 extra calories that you could burn. That's a lot of food. So whereas, when you're doing this dietary stuff and restricting the amount of calories you take in, and you're at 800 and you have a cookie, it's 112 calories, you're freaking out. And that's not what you're supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be
Mhm.
feeding your body properly and then doing the right exercises. So that's when I started to realize people had everything really confused about what they should and shouldn't be eating, how they exercise. Like I said, a lot of people think, well, I'm exercising, I'm walking, or I'm exercising, I'm jogging, or whatever else that they do. It's not the same thing because you got to put muscle mass on.
Mhm.
And back in the early 80s, a lot of the women, well, late 70s, early 80s, there was something called cellulite.
Mm.
I don't know if you remember that term, but the cellulite always formed on the back of the women's legs,
Oh, mhm,
like the dimply type, skin,
mhm,
and then on their butt and the back of their arms and things like that. And so that was like really that was their biggest concern. That's where the fat started to develop. And the hamstring area of your thigh, the back of the upper leg itself, and the butt area, which a lot of people would complain about, and also the belly too as well. So by changing what you eat and then how you train, you start to get rid of the cellulite. So
yeah,
we used to do seminars. There was lose those wiggly jiggly thighs, hips, and buttocks, and be anxious to come because I want to be able to do that, and that's
mhm,
what their main goal was at the time. And when I would watch these women, and they were probably at the time in their late 20s, early 30s, and they weren't like professional bodybuilders or anything else like that. They were either teachers or they had their own business and stuff. But when they would go into a show, they there was no fat on their bodies. There was no cellulite. Their bodies looked really good. They looked healthy. Again, this is back in the early 80s when they weren't taking drugs and starving themselves to,
mhm,
but they had a really good look as far as their health went, and it was just more dieting and exercise. Now, to go to those extremes, you don't want to do that, but they would get their body composition down to it was way too low. It wasn't a healthy body composition. I mean, to compete in, you could say yes and no, but to maintain that wasn't healthy. So you had to determine like what a healthy body comp would be for the average person. And again, each person is unique, and each
mhm,
person has like weight problems in different areas of their body. Some women come in and they're complaining about their arms being too big. And when I say too big, there's just too much fat. There's just too much wiggly stuff on the back of their arms or their belly, okay, or their legs. And it's kind of like, that's a combination of how you're going to diet and how you're going to exercise. And some of that, becomes, I would say, a little bit is like somewhat genetic because, women, again, and men, the same thing, their upper body might be bigger than their lower or vice versa. So, but you still have to look at that and say, okay, fine. How do I take if the lower body was heavier, how do I take the upper body and make it a little bit bigger and make the lower body a little bit smaller so it matches so you look a good weight? That's the other thing. It was like proportioning your body out. It's not so much looking at the weight because if you look at the weight in the mirror, you know where it is. It's
yeah,
like how do I get it? How do I get rid of it there? And then how do I take other areas of my body and put some muscle on? And so it's a situation where it does take time. But once you start doing it and you start realizing like, well, this is the way I'm supposed to do it, then you'll start seeing results. You'll start seeing, you know, your your body change.
mhm,
That's the one thing that I really liked about, when I was working out with weights. It's the only type of exercise that you can literally change the dimensions of your body. So your
mhm,
upper body smaller, bigger, you can put some more size on these muscles, less size on those muscles. And it's a process. And by doing that, you kind of take the whole body and you put it into a proper, let's just say, alignment as far as like the upper body looks like it belongs on the lower body instead of like the body is like, well, where'd the lower body come from? You follow what I'm saying? So
mhm,
that's what you want to start doing. So it was a nice way to think about it because that's the way it worked. And back in the mid 80s, I started to realize like how many people were having problems with their weight. And that's when they decided to write that book, How to Eat More, Lose Weight, and Never Diet Again,
mhm,
and based on, your metabolic rate and then how to stimulate your metabolic rate. But more importantly, it was like really mentally exercising your mind and making a commitment to yourself that that's what you were going to do. And as long as you're doing, you'll learn a lot about your own body. And that's what I wound up doing. I would take, we had these diaries that we had, it was 365 days. It was a book. And
Mhm.
back then it was pre-computer times. So you go to like January 5th. Okay, what'd you eat today? What'd you train today? How much weight did you do? How much sets did you do? What did you look like in the mirror? So you had all these different things that you would kind of like look at to determine, like, am I changing my body the way I want to? Because you can't like work out and then look at your body and go, oh, I made changes. You don't know if you made changes. It takes like months to see if, like, oh, I made changes. But you can't wait months to like see, like, oh, now I know what to do. You want to be able to know what to do right away, so you'll start making the changes nice and slowly. And then eventually you'll live that way. You'll live that kind of a lifestyle. You'll like what you're eating. You're not going to be like, in a position where you're dumbfounded. You can't figure this thing out. I'm gaining weight. I don't know why. And like, it's is it hormones? And there's a whole bunch of reasons why you possibly gain weight. So one is eating the wrong foods. One is eating foods that make you toxic, and the other one would, it's eating foods that'll, mess up your hormone levels and your enzymes and your antibodies.
Mhm.
When you look at each particular patient, that's why we do a blood test, because I can tell from the blood test, these are the kind of foods you should eat, as
Mhm.
opposed to what you think you should, or what the guru down the block says you should do. And then we pick the foods that you really like. And then this way we have a starting base as far as, okay, these are the foods you do well with. This is how much protein we want you to take in. This is how much fat we want you to take in, and the carbohydrates. And then we check their body composition too, as well, at the beginning and also at the end.
And yeah, and that's something that you can tell, like you said, through blood tests based on what their maybe their hormone levels are, or what they're deficient in, is helpful to figure out how or what people should eat rather. But
Yeah.
and what would help with their body composition. But even in your own life, which you've talked about a little bit, you've I know you experimented a little bit with bodybuilding and changing your weight. So obviously you knew how to really go about changing your body composition and knowing what to eat. But how did those experiences really shape your understanding of body composition even further?
Well, that was it, because once I saw, like, with myself, because again, you're going against, the mental grain of the medical society and everybody else out there. They're saying, weight loss is calories in, calories out, and you got to restrict your calories. Yeah, and it was all like pretty much lies. They weren't telling you the truth, because they knew that wasn't the truth, because they were keep on telling you to do things, and nobody was getting their weight loss. That's what really made me realize, like, this is the way you have to do it. So whenever I work with patients, that's exactly what I tell them. This is what you have to do.
And then when you do, talk to your patients or have to explain this concept to them, how do you explain to them why muscle fat and water weight matter so much more than just the pounds lost?
Well, just what I explained to them, like, the best thing too, it's if you really want to you forget about even getting technical, because they have, ways to measure your body fat and everything else like that. It's like, take your clothes off and look in the freaking mirror. The mirror doesn't lie. And after you take your clothes off and there's no clothes on your body, then the clothes don't lie either. It's just like, there you are. And you say to yourself, okay, within reason, not going crazy, what would I need to do to, like, feel like I'm going in a positive direction? And that's what we attempt to do with the patients. They'll tell us, we'll look at them, we'll analyze them. You know, we'll do body comp, but we'll analyze them and say, look in the mirror, tell me what you see. And they'll tell you, like, I've got too much fat here, or this, that, and the other thing. And, I've been doing this, I've been doing that. And so you say, okay, well, this is what we want you to do. And so we focus on exercises and the proper way to do those for your lower body and also for your upper body. So it's a learning experience. It does take time. As you learn it, it's a lot of fun, because once I realized, like, what I should and shouldn't be doing, it was it's kind of like something that you don't have to worry about ever again. People, but their whole life they worry about weight. They get into their teens and their 20s, and it's all about weight. And then, as they get into their 30s and 40s, they start to really put on the pounds, a lot of people, and then they don't know what to do. And by that time, they're usually having a lot of pain and a lot of discomfort, and they can't do a lot of things too as well. Because
Mhm.
that's what we find out. A lot of patients, when they're exercising, they're in pain. They're hurting. They can't really do what they're supposed to do. And when we teach people how to train, we teach them first and foremost how to prevent injuries as opposed to creating them. And so, we have it's nicer over here because I'll give you an example. I had a patient come in today, and she's had vertigo a year or so now, where if she looks up, she just loses it. She can't. And so when she's sleeping, she rolls over, she gets dizzy. She looks up too quick, she gets dizzy, and she doesn't know what's going on. They don't know what's happening because they say everything looks fine and everything is going good.
Mhm.
And so I did some cranial work on it yesterday and today. And she said to me, she goes, I can't believe how much better I feel just in those 2 visits. Not that she's perfectly cured, but there are so many people, especially in their 50s. I think she's 63. There's so many people in their 50s and 60s and 70s that have vertigo or dizziness or balance problems, and that's what happens. I was talking to a surgeon down in Boca one time, and he would have the 12 o'clock at night, the 8 o'clock in the morning shift. And I said, "What do you see mostly? Like car accidents and stuff, or
Mhm.
shootings or murders? Not in Boca, but Boca's pretty." He says, "No, no." He goes, "The people that down there, they're in their 60s and 70s. They get out of bed, and all of a sudden they lose their balance, slam their head off the floor, get a brain bleed, and now he's got to go in there and do surgery, brain surgery." And he
Yeah.
said, happens a lot. And so it happens with a lot of people. And I explained to this woman, I said, you can exercise now. If you try to exercise with weights and you try to do anything over your neck or over your head, you're going to start having problems with balance and dizziness. And you're not going to want to do it because who wants to feel dizzy and, have balance problems and realizing it's going to get worse if you keep on doing that. So, and to make matters worse, she had surgery about 11 years ago on her neck where they had to fuse it further. So that makes it even more complicated. But what I was trying to say is that at least we have an ability to like work with patients that we treat, and at the same time, then we get them out to exercise. And we have a one of our doctors here, Dr. Parker. He's a gem as far as working out goes, and he works with the difficult cases. So people who are in their 60s and 70s, and they really can't do much. And he'll get them to do a lot of things that they, and he puts them on, he teaches them how to create a program. He
Mhm.
works them on the program, he sets it up for them. And so it's a real nice way for them to start. So it's like, you can't just look at a person and say, I want to lose the weight because it could be very, very complicated by, people suffering with low back pain or neck pain like this lady had. And then you have to be able to deal with that. And then also nutrition, and then also treatment and exercise. But if you do all those things, you'll be able to deal with a lot of cases that people want help for, but they can't get it. They're not going to get it. So,
Mhm. Absolutely. And then I think, you know, you would be able to speak to this far more than I could, but just being a regular person, we look at the scale and we're obsessed with that number.
oh yeah.
But, like we've explained, there's so much more that goes into weight and body composition beyond the number on the scale. But as a society, I think we're all.
Oh, they've programmed me to do that.
Mhm.
That's insane. It was like, back in the early '80s when I was studying this and learning. I studied nutrition in the '70s, but once I got out of school, it takes a good, 7, 8, 10 years with nutrition to at least get an idea of like, you know, how does everything kind of work. And so using the blood chemistry analysis really taught me like this can tell me what kind of foods they should be eating. It tells me what glands or organs in the body are working properly. For example, if you have a thyroid problem, you're going to slow down your metabolism. So you got to do things to help speed the thyroid up. And not just taking Synthroid, although some people are taking it. You want to hopefully do it so that your body can produce the thyroxine itself. But sometimes it can't do that. But we look at all those things. If you have a congested liver, you're going to have difficulty losing weight. If you have digestive problems, you're going to have problems losing weight. Colon problems, or if you're constipated all the time, you got to figure out what's causing that constipation because that's making your body really toxic. So
Mhm.
each person's like unique. And so, when I was first learning this, like, this is not like, okay, yeah, everybody go on this diet, you'll be fine. And that's what you see on TV today. You have the diet that's right for everybody. It's this guy says it does wonders for everybody. It's not true. Everybody has a different metabolism. They come
Mhm.
from different origins. They eat different foods, genetically, biochemically, they adapted to those foods. So it's like it's unique. You have to really look at each person. So when you take everybody and say, okay, go on this fasting or this low calorie diet, for some people, they'll go, oh, I lost 10, 12 pounds, 15 pounds. But you talk to them 3 years later and they're up 40 or 50. So they didn't get anywhere. I've watched people with diets their whole life and they just, it's never, they never get to a point where they feel comfortable with their weight.
Right. And there's so many fad diets. And, even going back to what you're saying in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s and now in, 2025, there's so for example, like the shots, and there's always some sort of fad diet. And no matter what decade it is, there's some kind of fad diet, quick fix, or whatever it is, weight loss drugs. I remember in high school in like the early or like mid 2000s, everyone before prom was like trying to chug bottles of like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I could say the name, but like hydroxycut and all this stuff that was just like horrible for them. And then maybe they lost the weight, but they gained it back. And, I think we know that extreme fads and
Tell you a story. It's my wife was, having an issue. She was trying to lose weight one time. So do you remember ephedra? It was a pill.
I don't know, but I remember like around 2005 to like 2008. I just remember every time I would turn on the TV or open like a teen magazine, it was just like weight loss pills
Yeah.
everywhere.
That was it. So my wife went on this ephedra. It was they sold it over the counter, and then eventually took it off, took it out. So because it was so, we're driving up to New York from Florida, and we have all the kids with us. So we had two cars. I was following my wife, and she was looking good. She had dropped some of the weight. She was really happy. We're driving up to New York, and all of a sudden, we're on I-95, around Washington, D.C., right below it. It was really crowded. The road was crazy.
Mhm.
And so I start to see my wife pull over to the side and go right off, off the road. And then I pull behind her and I see a lot of commotion going on in the car. My oldest daughter, Natalie, at the time, she was probably 14. She helped my wife steer the car over onto the side because my wife was like, having all kinds. She was like dizzy. She couldn't think straight. I got there. I didn't know what was going on. I opened the door. She was like, just like in a daze. Dragged her out of the car. I didn't know what was happening. And she never told me that she was taking the ephedra stuff until until that time. And so we got her to the hospital. They checked her out. They said there was really nothing wrong, and just to give us some, just give us some water and some salt and stuff like that. And so we had to literally stay, there overnight for 2 days, and she wasn't getting that much better. So I said, look, let's just take one car. I'll just drive everybody up. I'll fly back and get my car and then drive up there. So it's like I wasted three days of my vacation just doing that stuff. But it was like, I saw it and I said, why are you doing this? You know better. I said, well, I was going up to New York and I wanted to, get some weight off. And it's like you can get it off by doing the right things. You don't need to do it. And she knows all this stuff. She knows how
Mhm.
to train. She's trained for years, decades. She doesn't like to train much anymore, but I tell her you need to do this, and if you want to keep your weight down to a really conservative degree, then that's what you have to do. So I mean, we eat good. It's not that we don't, because a lot of the evenings I tend to cook the meal, and she'll make the vegetables and stuff. But we're always having up protein. I don't even like going out to eat anymore. I used to love going out to eat.
Mm.
I don't like it for two reasons. Number one, it's super expensive now, and not that I can't afford it, but it's like it doesn't make sense to spend like $200 on a dinner that I can go over and for 35, $40 make my dinner, and it's
And you
gonna
know what's in it. You know
be.
what you're putting in it too.
So that's what we do pretty much. And during the day, I have my protein shakes. I tend to always eat, really as good as possible. I drink some coffee, not really much at all, and then with alcohol, maybe a beer or two, and that's about it. So I stay really consistent with what I do, and I write and that's the other thing too that most people don't do. I write everything down. It sounds people go, "You want me to write this stuff down?" Yeah. Why? I said, "Do you do that with your bank account? Do you know what's in your bank account, or you just write checks and do you just use your credit cards and like don't keep a balance going?" You
Mhm.
have to do that because, and I'll say to them, they'll go, "No, I eat a good diet." So I said, "Well, what did you eat 3 weeks ago on Saturday night?" They go, "Come on." So, no, what did you eat 3 weeks ago on Saturday night? I don't remember. I said, I do because I have it written down and I'll show you what I ate. So, and that's the only way you're going to know if what you're eating is making the changes and what's going on. And by writing everything down, that's what really helped me the most. And most people don't want to write it down. Uh, You
Mhm.
know, again, even with exercise, I explain to people, I said, what, one of the most important exercises, or probably the most important exercise you can do is stretching. Do they stretch? No. I mean, does it cost you any money to stretch? No. Do you have to get some kind of an outfit to go out and stretch? No. Do you have to drive anywhere to stretch? No. You just
Mhm.
lay on the floor and stretch. That's it.
Mhm.
You know what to do. And people just go, no, I don't want to do that. It's like, it's not a big deal. And it's these small things that people don't want to do that
Mhm.
make a big difference down the line. You don't stretch, and then 2 years from now, your back will be killing you, and you'll wonder why. And it's like if you just kept on stretching, you'd be fine. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think also even to kind of touch on that, even people that may have been active before or maybe weren't active, but through COVID and everyone staying at home, especially if you started to work from home. I mean, I know I felt it when you were saying that. I was like, oh my God. I used to stretch and be active, and then having worked from home, I started to feel it in my body because I wasn't stretching and I wasn't working out, and you're sitting down all day and you will feel it. You definitely will feel it
yeah.
over time for sure. And I mean, even talking about your personal health journey, I know you did some bodybuilding and you changed your body composition, but was there ever a point for you where the scale told you one story, but your body told you another?
It always does.
Mhm.
You look at when I look at the scale, it'll be like let's say I'm trying to put some weight on, so I want to go up, and maybe I want to go like 3 or 4 pounds. So what I'll do is I'll change the not change the types of foods I eat because they stay pretty consistent, but just the amount. I'll have maybe 4 meals a day, 5 meals a day, as opposed to 2 or 3. But it's kind of like just always watching that. And when you look at it that way, you'll start to see like what things curb your appetite too, because that's the other thing you have to think about. What things are really good for me, and then what things really curb my appetite. Like for example, I know if I have like a heavy duty fatty protein type meal, I'm good for hours. I don't have to eat anything. But if I have more of a carbohydrate meal, especially in the morning, a lot of times I like to eat fruit. So,
Mhm.
so you have the fruit, and maybe I'll put some yogurt in there and stuff, and it tastes good. But within an hour, 2 hours, I'm hungry. Whereas if I have like eggs and bacon and bread and stuff like that and butter, I'll have maybe two eggs, 3 eggs, and some cheese and stuff, and that'll keep me going for hours. So it's really knowing what kind of foods keep your blood sugar level too, because that's the other thing that you want to maintain a good, not just so much your cholesterol level, but your blood sugar has to be pretty consistent as well. So
Mhm. And I think also, kind of what we said a few minutes ago about people always obsessing over the scale and the number on the scale, and as a society we're so obsessed with it. But why do you think that is? even though it doesn't clearly reflect true health and it's not directly correlated to your body composition. But why do you think that we are just so obsessed with the number on the scale versus actual true health?
They literally programmed us to think that way. It's like, for example, cholesterol. I always hop on this anyway. Cholesterol levels back in the early 80s were between 225 and 325. And then they linked cholesterol with heart disease, which really wasn't true. But they pushed so hard with the cholesterol stuff. And then they started coming out because you couldn't lower cholesterol in the body naturally because the body produces 80% of the cholesterol, the liver does. And so by by let's say utilizing that scenario, okay, they decided that, well, let's see if we could put something like create some kind of a chemical or a medicine that prevents the liver from making cholesterol, which pumps it up to begin with. And then this way we can lower cholesterol levels. And that's what they attempted to do. But it got to a point where they just kept on harping, like, you can't go to your doctor. And the first question is going to ask you, what's your cholesterol levels? And if you tell him 200, he's going to say it's too high. And yeah,
Mhm.
get on this statin. And then they would literally force patients, like, if you don't take the statin, I'm not going to treat you. And so they really just push. And then I'd have patients come in like in the 90s and 2000s, and they go, you do a whole blood chemistry, and we have, like, we usually about 80 plus biomarkers. And the one question they always ask, how's my cholesterol?
Mhm.
Your cholesterol's doing good. The rest of your blood test sucks, but the cholesterol's doing good. So, but it was like a joke. They couldn't care anything about anything else but their cholesterol, and it's just the way they've done it with the pharmaceuticals now. I mean, every other commercial is a drug commercial. That's why they're pushing this GLP-1 stuff and all the other stuff that they're going to keep on pushing. And they're already putting together, combinations of these things that they're going to, flood the market with. And I'll tell you right now, we're going to become more obese and more morbidly obese over the next 5 years because
Mhm.
nobody's trying to do it with diet and the proper exercise. They're just trying to do it with, like, drugs, and no, I'll just shoot the drugs and I'll see what happens.
Mhm.
That doesn't help, then maybe I'll try something else. But you're always then behind the eight ball because you don't know what's working and what's not working.
Right. And this is probably one of the things, but talking about like GLP-1s or fad diets, but in your decades of practice, what have you seen as some of the biggest mistakes that people make when focusing only on weight loss?
Oh, just that they don't taking enough protein.
Mhm.
Never taken enough protein. If you had, it's like, again, there's like, there's three types of foods. There's proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. And so if you look at the body's made up, majority it's water, 50, 60%. But the next to most abundant thing that makes up the body is protein. It's
Mhm.
25 to 30%, well, 25 to 40% of your body weight. And, fat should make up about 15 to 20%. And so that's where a good amount of, let's say your body composition should be in that area. But I watch people over the years because when they vilified cholesterol is a fat, but it's always found with protein. So
Mhm.
by eliminating cholesterol and fat, they eliminated meats, dairy, stuff like that. And then by doing that, the amount of, let's say, protein that you were taking in was not much at all. And protein regenerates the body. Lack of protein degenerates the body. So
Mhm.
degenerating diseases today is like heart disease, cancer, even osteoporosis, and a lot of joint damage with the bones and the muscles and ligaments and tendons. That's all degenerative stuff. So by regenerating the body with a good amount of protein, you're going to be good. And what happens is when I do put people on more of a higher protein, and I'm not saying don't go crazy. People, oh, I want to eat just on ketogenic. I just want to eat protein and fat. I'm
Mhm.
a fat person, but I would never tell you to just eat that. You got to eat like healthy, and you got to make sure that the amount of fat you're taking in is good, the amount of protein you're taking in is good, and you're sustaining your weight, and you feel really good, and you have a lot of energy, and you like what your body feels like, and you like what your body looks like. And you know, if you did, and you know, if you continued on doing these particular things, it would just get better and better.
Absolutely. And, you know, clearly doing that will help to change your body composition. So, how
Absolutely.
is improving body composition influence the other sides of health beyond, just the composition and the appearance, but actually the physical and the mental, emotional pillars of the triune?
It's a good question. When you have a good body composition, that means that the body's functioning at a high level. In other words, neurologically, it's functioning at a high level. Um, from a position of repairing and rebuilding cells, it's functioning at a high level. When you're looking at your hormones, enzymes, and antibodies, you'll see that it's functioning at a fairly good level, and you feel good and you feel strong. That was the thing when I was, every time when I was, eating right and exercising properly, it always felt good.
And absolutely. And I'm sure that you have, but with your experience and in all the years you've been practicing, have you seen patients not only look better, but feel better emotionally once they stop obsessing over the scale?
Absolutely. No, they definitely feel much better. They definitely, and the other thing too is, um, eating, even though it's chemical, so many people get so emotional over what they're eating and how much they should eat, and if they're eating the right thing or the wrong thing, and they just get frustrated with their food. I'd go out to a restaurant with certain people, and they go, where was it made, or where was it cooked, or where was this chicken raised? And they ask all these like stupid questions. It's like, I'm freaking starving. Let's just eat. And then they'll question and they'll interrogate the waiter or waitress. And then then dinner's over, and then they want a dessert. Each And then they feel guilty they had the dessert. So you're either in a state of guilt, okay, or you're in a state of like, gee, I can't have that, so therefore, you know, I'm not getting what I really want. So you're guilty or you feel deprived, one or the other, and that's not the way you're supposed to be. If you want the dessert, have it. But if you're training properly and you're eating properly, that 3, 4, 500 calories is not going to do anything. Unless you're doing it every night for like weeks and weeks on end. But when you just have an occasional, whatever, for somebody's birthday and things like that, you go out to dinner, have a dessert. But as long as you're doing everything properly, you should be fine.
Balance and moderation, I
Yeah,
think, go a long way with that. And when you're talking about body composition and how it changes, it's not just the number on the scale isn't gonna exactly reflect how you look or how you feel. So it's not even, particularly about the number. It's really about how you're fueling your body and the exercises you're doing and the right foods that you're eating. I know you said something earlier, and I completely related to that about like under eating, really, because talking about obsessing with the number on the scale in society, we were always told, eat less, you're gonna weigh less. And even though we know now that that's not particularly true whatsoever,
yeah,
but
true.
under eat and gain weight as well. If you're not fueling your body, like you said with the car, if you're not putting gas in the car, it's not gonna go faster. And it was a good comparison because there can
Well,
be.
most people can understand that. It's like, so if I want my car to go faster, I give it more gas. If I want my metabolism to speed up, I got to give it the right kinds of foods. And given the right kinds of foods, it'll speed up. And don't look to speed everything up in a month or 2 months. It's going to take some time. But the
Mhm.
more you give it and the more exercise you do, the more you start to feel like, okay, I'm eating right, I'm exercising properly, I'm putting on some muscle, I feel stronger, my body is looking a little bit different than it did maybe a few months ago. And that was the biggest thing with me when I first got into bodybuilding. My body responded pretty quickly. So when I was working out, like within 2 or 3 months, I noticed like I was gaining some size and I felt good. And I said, okay, if I keep on doing this, then I know that what I'm doing is working. That's what I did. So I just focused on, always writing everything down, making sure like what I was saying was, kind of true for me. And true for a lot of other people. And I realized that if you just watch what you eat, and the combinations of foods that you eat, and the proper exercise, you don't have to go crazy. Because then there are people out there that they'll go on a crazy diet, restrict calories, and then work out like a horse. And it's like, why are you going to push your body when you're not even feeling it? It's like
Mhm,
racing a car that's, it doesn't have fuel. You're not going anywhere. You're just going to cause damage to the engine sooner or later. So
mhm,
it was really looking at, making sure that when you're eating properly and you're eating a good amount of food and knowing eventually as time goes on, how many calories you should take in. Like
mhm.
my caloric intake right now is usually anywhere between maybe a low of 25 to a high of 4,045, usually course of the day. So, and I feel, I mean, am I hungry? No. Do I feel good eating that? Yeah. And there are days where I feel I shouldn't be eating 4,000 calories because my body tells me it's like, you're starving today. Eat something.
Mhm.
And and that's the other thing too. A lot of people confuse like their I'll give you an example. Most people confuse they'll say like, "Oh, I eat cookies. I'm a sugar fanatic. I love cookies and I love cake." And sugar is not what you're complaining of. It's your fat levels. You're not taking in enough fat. Fat tastes sweet too, except it's 3 times the calories of sugar. So by taking in the fat, and the reason why you want the fat is because you're not giving yourself enough fat in your diet. Healthy, like with the eggs and the cheese and the meats and stuff like that.
It makes sense. I know I have friends and I've thought it if there was times you're dieting and you wanna not bring in or, um, have a lot of calories, so you'll have a salad for dinner, but not a salad that's including the right things, like maybe no protein or not a substantial salad, a
Yeah.
little side salad. And after that, 20 minutes later, you're like, I need a pint of Haagen-Dazs and
Yeah.
I want and it's true. It's like
Yeah.
whatever and I remember
Right.
my coworkers, we would always say that when we were trying to be good and have little salads for lunch and not fuel our bodies. It would be an hour later and we were both like, "Can we go raid, the kitchen pantry in the office?" And it was like that clicked in my head because I remember saying, "Why is it every time that we're eating super healthy, we just wanna eat sugar after?"
Yeah.
And that's
It's
exactly
the
what
fat.
it
It's the fat. It's because the ice cream is all fat. And,
is.
so and fat tastes sweet. So
Mhm,
if you're not taking in enough fat with the meats and the eggs and stuff, you're gonna still crave it. And then when you crave it, you're gonna get the most fattiest thing like Haagen-Dazs ice cream, which I love too. But you can't eat that all the time. And what's interesting too now? It's like I don't have to eat dessert. It's like we'll go out like the other night we had a lot of people in my family have birthdays in late September, October. So we don't celebrate everybody's birthday. We just celebrate them all at the same time. So, but you had cake, you had pie, you got these, Sprazza birthday cakes, and you got these cookies, and you're gonna eat like that. I mean, that's like one day during the week, but just I ate some, and that was fun. I didn't have to eat like 5 or 6 cookies. You just have one a piece of cake, and that was it. So you can get away with it after a while. You don't need that amount. You don't even want it. It doesn't even taste that good anymore.
Absolutely, yeah, and then I do think like, if you do eat, for example, a substantial meal with the right fats and you're having a full meal with different things in it, like you said, like fats and cheeses and, meats, you're not gonna have that craving after the way you would if you're not fueling your body properly. It's so true.
And then also when you do eat like that, you don't feel good the next day anyway. Because you had the salad and you just had a lot of ice cream and stuff. Whereas if you had, I always tell people, "Oh, I love salads, doc." I said, "I gotta tell you what, this is what you do. I want you to have a small salad and a big piece of meat, or a big
Mhm.
piece of chicken, or a big piece of fish on there, twice the size of the salad. Then at least you know you're doing good."
Absolutely. And, for listeners tuning in right now and even a little bit for myself, I want to get back on the right path because I've fallen off a little bit. But what's one simple first step that they could take or I could take even starting improving their body composition? this week or today? What's one thing that
Just start eating protein. Look at how much protein you're eating, and then you should be eating. I'll give you an example. If you weigh 150 pounds, you should be taking in around 6 ounces of protein a day. Now, people go, "Why take that in?" I said, "No, you don't." I said, "Let me explain what 6 ounces of protein is. You have 6 ounces of red meat, you get 2 ounces of protein. 6 ounces of fowl, you get 1 ounce. And 6 ounces of fish, no, excuse me, 6 ounces of meat, you'll get three. 6 ounces of fowl, you get two. 6 ounces of fish, you'll get one, and unless it's like a cold water fish. So if you need six ounces of protein, you got to eat 2 pounds of fish a day, and people they don't eat that amount. So you say just start to boost up your protein, even if you have to take in a protein shake. But focus on, if you want meat, that's a really good protein, and then figure out what meat you really like. Do you like you know cow meat? Do you like pork? Do you like veal? What is it that you really like? And then kind of go from there. But protein would be a real big key thing. And based on your weight, you can look and see, like, for every 25 pounds of your weight, you should have 1 ounce of protein.
Okay, so that's like the rule of thumb, every 25 pounds.
Yeah, that's usually what I usually we calculate it a little bit better when we do the blood test.
Mhm.
But send my patients a sheet that talks about if they weigh 125, 150, 175, this is how much protein they should take in a day. And these are the kinds of proteins that you should take in. So it kind of gives them an idea of where they should start at least, and you kind of go from there. So
Good to know. Yeah, I think that that is something that is eye-opening because I would have not realized that that wasn't the right amount of protein either. So
no, most people don't. Most people, I mean, I'll talk to patients and they'll go, "Okay, what'd you eat today?" Well, we can't talk about today. They'll tell me. I said, "Why?" "Oh no, today wasn't a good day." I said, "Okay, tell me a decent day. What do you do?" "Well, I get up and I have some cereal and I have some skim milk and I have some fruit with that." I said, "Okay." "And tell me what do you do for lunch?" "Well, I have a salad like we just talked about,
Mhm.
and maybe a little piece of chicken. And then for dinner, it's like a heads up. It could be pasta, it could be anything." And I tell them, I said, "You ate enough protein. A snail needs more protein than you just took in for a human being. So don't, you're not going nowhere near what you should be going with the protein." So, and the more you start eating, the more you start feeling like I get fuller faster, I feel better, I have more energy, and I can kind of stay away from food for 3 or 4 hours and just utilize what I just took in at that meal. So, but protein is the key, and then also with exercise, just you do a lot of weight training. And I'm not saying weight training like, yelling and screaming and, you know, trying to lift super heavy weight, just trying to do things, contract the muscles, make sure that, you're making the muscles work and using a light to moderate weight, especially with a woman. And then, she just wants to be able to like work all the different muscles of her body. That's the one good thing about the weight training too, that I didn't mention, my love, is that with the weight training, as compared to other exercises, you can stimulate every muscle in your body with the weight training. You can't do that, with, let's say you're walking down the street, or, whatever you're jogging, you can't get all the muscles. You won't be able to do that. Where with bodybuilding, you can work on the shoulders, chest, the back, the abs, the legs, the butt, and then isolate specific muscles within those groups too, as well, once you get good at it, so you can stimulate everything. So those are two things I'd say, like, just start doing some kind of weight training and just basic, nothing super crazy. It's just basic stuff, and you'll start seeing. And the more you get into it, the more you'll learn about it. If you want to hire a trainer, or you feel like you need that kind of a situation, that's what you do. So
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Seema. I think definitely this was an eye-opening conversation about why inches, not pounds, tell the real story of health. I know I definitely learned a lot, a lot today about body composition, but you definitely showed us how shifting the focus from the scale to body composition can really transform the way we approach weight, strength, and confidence. So be sure to follow the show so you don't miss more, don't miss anything. And until then, here is to your health without limits. Thank you, Dr. Cima.
Thank you, Layla. Have a great day.